in a way to jump in and say, hey, this is our city and you can't take it from us, and we're gonna fight back. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm lending my voice, and it's not always serious. It's often funny, but I feel like you get people to care by getting them to laugh and getting them to pay attention. Because if it's just hard politics all day long, they're gonna lose interest. So I've been trying to use humor to subversively get messages across. That like, hey, it's important that you care, it's important that you're here, and it's important that you be here and vote. So that's what I've been focusing on. Issues that are important to me are obviously affordability. It's not even the elephant in the room. It's the big ass thing that's taking up all of our space. It's affordability. It is homelessness is big, as you all know. Street group, of course, which is tied with homelessness and affordability. Corruption's huge. We have a major corruption issue in this city, and it's gone back. It's the Brown-Burton machine, and I'd love to see that machine dismantled. Willie picked Gavin. Gavin picked, Ed Lee.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in together. I'd love to see, like I mentioned before, public advocate's office to actually tackle the issues that we have at City Hall, and then other quality of life issues as well. So this is the best city in the world, and I want to keep it that way. So that's why I'm here.
Thanks. My name is Francisco Herrera, and very similar to what my compañeros here have said. I've been involved in city politics for almost 30 years here in San Francisco, raised my kids here, got 2 grandchildren here, and always been involved from the street level, from the community organization level of helping change budgetary decisions, policy decisions to the benefit of the common good, creating helping to form projects like the San Francisco Day Labor Program, coming to the editorial boards and forming public opinion when we felt that there wasn't enough attention on people projects, helping to create what was the Community Peace Initiative, which actually, because of the budgetary decisions that we pushed through, was able to create a moment in San Francisco history where there was no youth killing youth because of the putting midnight basketball, after school programming, funding the kind of projects that people need, right, to be able to operate, to have quality of life. The question from which we've been operating is, it is what kind of city do we want to see, as Reed was suggesting. What city do we, the citizenry, want for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years? In very much the same format of when I did not see one of the regular political leaders, Amiano, Leno, the other folks I mentioned. Things had happened. Alex Nieto was murdered in Bernal Hill. 24 families were displaced out of that fire in December in 22nd and Mission. One person died there. An Arab girl with her father, both died in another mysterious fire on Folsom and 24th. Amilcar Perez Lopez was murdered, 6 shots to the back by detectives who did not identify themselves as police on Folsom and 24th. Those kind of things really created a sense of, wow, this wave of gentrification is much more belligerent. And discussions like, for example, at the board, someone had the gall a year earlier just raise the question, what are we going to do about the mariachi problem in the Mission? the mariachi problem in the Mission, well, pay them better. That's the mariachi problem in the Mission. But, it was like, I thought, wow, the racist, belligerent level was so high that people actually, I felt free enough to raise that, to say, we're here to kick all these brown people out of here. What the hell are we doing supporting mariachis playing the Mission? And so that really, so of course we were all waiting, okay, someone's got to come up. Then I think the final announcement was Leno and Amiano. I think that's what we're all mentioning, because they finally announced, we're not gonna raise because the damage that was done to Campos. Lee's got millions of dollars to sink anyone, and it was like, are we really gonna give a free walk into City Hall to this guy who's literally destroyed not just the mission. I mean, there's people with jobs in the sunset living in cars, elderly Russian and Chinese living in fear of when am I gonna get the letter? Retired teachers. I'm on fixed income saying I'm about to retire in 2 years. If I get that famous letter, we're sorry to inform you, your building's been sold, what am I gonna do? And so this attitude that began really in the time of Mayor Brown saying, if you don't make $50,000 a year, you don't belong here. Well, now it's at $150,000 to $200,000 a year. If you don't make that, you don't belong here. Is that really what you're gonna say to an 80-year-old longshoreman, retired longshoreman, a retired cook, a retired nurse, a retired sister, that they don't belong here because they're not in that bracket of income? It's a complete preposterous is my Batman word. As that, but it just really felt this very harsh, and so what we sat down and said, look, I have no interest in playing the circus of politics. With all due respect to real circus workers, but it was like, but it really was, this thing where this little electoral cycle every 4 years, redrawing the map and redrawing the little plan. And so what's happening here is we're in the middle of one of those historic globalization economies. It's all moving to the Pacific Rim, and if I give you an image, it's almost like the corporate leaders, well, I wouldn't know if I want to call them leaders, but corporate controllers have said, if the world is a town, we will identify our neighborhoods. Manhattan, San Francisco, Bay Area, not just a city, Mexico City, Brasilia, Paris, etc. And it feels very much, having been a worker, a humanitarian worker in several wars already in El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, and experience in the life of U.S. embassies in the Green Zone in Iraq, it's very much where you seal these areas and you say, only whoever we allow comes in here. And that eerie reminders coming to my mind as I'm seeing this thing develop, where it's like, we have an answer for the poor. Yeah, get them out of here. That's our response to the poor. And actually, Mayor Lee literally verbalized it, right?
Yeah.
And it's the old plantation house. Only a certain amount of folks come in to work here. More than half the city employees cannot afford to live in San Francisco.
So let's get the question started.
So yeah, just to close, for us it was a matter of developing a 12-year plan that goes beyond electoral politics of every 4 years, establishing the seeds to create a citywide alliance of folks that can work on these particular issues. So our 8-point platform is really a platform to continue to work on affordability, education, health.
Well, you brought up affordability, and the big issue is housing. So I was just wondering, we've heard what the mayor has to say about housing, and we've seen some of the results of some of his policies. I was wondering if each one of you could, identify one specific thing that you would do that the mayor's not doing as it relates to housing, in whatever order that you choose.
Well, I think the mayor is not doing what he could be doing, which is saying, we're in a state of emergency here. Over 10,000 people have been displaced just from one neighborhood, the mission, not to mention the whole city. And we really need to re-examine how we've opened up the city to investors, not necessarily to developers, to investors. Let's stop, and that's why people were actually forced to propose Proposition I in one neighborhood to hope to take it citywide, to say, let's stop the building of luxury apartments for people who do not live here, and let's really explore affordable housing for people who need to live here because they work here, they've been here.
I'd like to make it so that all affordable housing projects get to cut right through the red tape and go right to the front of the line for the planning department, so they don't have to wait 18 months or 2 years to start building. And also, there are plenty of developers in the U.S. who only do affordable housing. Just fuck with them. Don't mess with them. If you want to come and do luxury, you get back to the back of the line, and let the people who do affordable develop first.
I would say that Prop I is actually the people saying that we need legislation to follow the plan that was already devised through the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan of 2008. But my solution, it's a twofold piece. I've been very enthusiastic about additional dwelling units and was very happy that things started moving forward with David Chu, as well as Scott Wiener promoting that, Julie Christensen. So my idea is this: there are 37,000 parcels that have been identified in San Francisco that can have one or more additional dwelling unit added to the structure. It costs anywhere between $50,000 to $250,000 in order to add an additional dwelling unit, whereas we know it's $500,000 to $700,000 for a new building that's constructed. And so my thought is that this is the second piece. We create a registry for the city of people who work here and help the city function, whether it be teachers, paraprofessionals, healthcare workers, so on and so forth, city workers. And we see if they're paying more than 30% of their income for rent. And if they are, then we figure out how we can help them to funnel into one of these ADU units that we help with the financing and the construction and design, so that it actually is a cost-effective investment for them, and they're going to start making profit on it over time. But we say, we will help you with all of this, and it will give you a revenue stream, but you have to take civic pride in San Francisco and support its functioning as an ecosystem and rent to someone in our registry who's a city worker and rent to them at 30% of their income.
So I think my take on this is a little bit different than everyone else here. I don't believe that outside investors or outside developers building units with any percentage of affordable housing is a path forward for creating affordable San Francisco. I actually think one of the best ways we can do this from a rent perspective is to sort of look at. I think rent control is fundamentally flawed. I think it's a broken system. I think whatever system we use needs to apply to all units equally, and I think rent control as it currently stands can't do that. And so what I've done is I've proposed a plan called balanced rent. And balanced rent looks at a citywide income-weighted rent model, wherein everybody who lives here today and everybody who is continuing to move here in the future has a fighting chance in terms of demand power. So what happens right now when you have, obviously a supply-demand model and you have a constricted amount of supply, and this is something that we see over and over again during economic boom times, when the supply gets constricted, any new landlords or any new units that go on the market are going to be put at a very high price. And so only the people at the very high end are able to afford this. So right now when you look at units in San Francisco and you divide out by quintiles for each sort of economic income status, the low end you're paying just under 300% of your income for a median apartment. And on the high end you're paying just over 10% of your income. So that differentiation clearly indicates, and even at the median one, you're paying almost 50% of your income for a median apartment, right? So we've got 60 to 80% of people in the city who cannot afford rent as it currently stands. Now, we can continue to add to the supply, we can increase the amount of housing that we have in the city, but we're going to keep seeing this process happen over and over again every single time we have any kind of economic boom. And so we need to start thinking about a systemic solution to rent today that's going to both affect us immediately today and also is going to propel us into the future for any future economic booms that we're going to do, so we don't yet again end up in this problem. And the problem essentially is, as I think Francisco was saying earlier, is in a global economy, demand is able to move more fluidly than supply in a constrained resource city like we have here. We are never going to be able to build as quickly as demand is going to be able to go up or go down. So we are able to get a tech company that can move tens of thousands of employees to San Francisco. We cannot build fast enough to react to that appropriately. We can try to build in advance and have the foresight, but supply and demand relates to how much you're building at the time of the demand, not in the future. So the model for balanced rent really looks at what happens when you put the weighting tools. It's like grading on a curve, right? What happens when you give the weighting to the residents of San Francisco to figure out what do we actually want a rent distribution to look like, which essentially elevates the demand power for everybody across the board and says that we're not willing, all the way up to, say, a third of the income for every single person in the city if we want to go that far. But it essentially says that we don't think that this distribution model is effective and that we have a way to shift that.
Building out housing, the homeless issue, it's, the mayor's been talking about it a lot lately. He announced last week a 311 app to report homeless persons in the street. Just wondering if you have any other ideas about what the mayor should be doing, what he should not be doing as it relates to the homeless population in San Francisco, whether it's maybe repeal the sit-lie law or anything along those lines.
Yeah, well, I've been talking about this for quite a while now. The St. Francis Super Bowl Homelessness Challenge is what I've framed it as
Right.
at present, because for better or for worse, Ed Lee made the Super Bowl a catalyst for action. And I say we do it for better, because instead of investing in just pushing people out, I know how to stretch a budget, and I know the pieces that are in place here that we could use in the city. If we had about $5 million, we could be helping a couple thousand homeless people get interim structures that are set up on land that has actually been indexed by a Cal Berkeley professor named Nicholas de Monchaux. He did an index a few years ago of all the city-owned property throughout the city that is underutilized. And he was thinking of it, envisioning it as, how do we benefit these neighborhoods with this land? And so I think we do a 2-for-1 in that we create some structures on there. And granted, people are already living in tent cities all over the place, but this would be a more humane, cost-effective, and really, quite frankly, beautiful way of doing this, that we actually figure out, is there a need in this neighborhood that this group of people working together can help to fill? Maybe there's a food truck there. Maybe there's some piece, some way. Maybe, Burning Man is headquartered in San Francisco. They could do beautiful night light structures. There's so many creative, amazing things we could do, and treating our homeless neighbors with dignity. And we've been pointing out the stats from the count that was done in 2015. Over 70% of the people who are on the streets say that they're from San Francisco. And Stuart says, these are our people, and they're our people, and we can treat them with dignity. And we can also do something that's so exciting that the whole world takes note of. This is how you support your neighbors who are most vulnerable.
Whoever wants to go next.
I could give a shit about the Warriors coming to San Francisco. Oakland can keep them. They've done great in Oakland. We could use that space a lot better. We could use it for affordable housing. We could use it as one giant navigation center. Another idea that I had, and this isn't to ghettoize the population, but we have Treasure Island, and there's all this space there. What if we made a giant navigation center? And I'm not telling you can't come back to San Francisco, but there's transit back and forth. But there's all these buildings that aren't being used. There's all this empty space, and we could do a lot of services there where people can go and have all the services they need, all the treatment they need, and all the advocates and counselors they need, in a way that kind of gets them back on their feet, and then we can hopefully rehabilitate them back in the system instead of just having them live in tent cities underneath the freeway. We need to put these people in housing. This could be a very good housing first solution.
There's, I think, for me, that's a piece that is really goes back to political will. I mean, there is a situation of housing crisis, and the Lee administration has completely opened the doors for companies like Airbnb, which is kind of the biggest one, to be able to help companies buy entire buildings and kick entire families out, and so that exacerbates the situation that we were living through already. Homelessness really, we've talked about this in a long time, is really a very long road. That they like to make poster child of the person who is on the street right now, but there's entire families who are homeless, but they happen to have friends or relatives who are pulling them together in the living room or in their own cars, and this whole criminalization of the homeless, one, and two, the ignoring the fact of what is causing that 70%, right, to find that long road to finally be in the street is what's being ignored. And that is a question of political will, of actually playing, okay, there's a surplus in the budget, and there's companies, there's groups like the Coalition on Homelessness and many other groups who have actually been working and developing plans. The coalition has a 5-year plan to eliminate homelessness. So instead of having the political will and the budgetary sense to say, there's projects, programs that work here, let's finance those with this funding. What has happened has been a criminalization and an attack on the very victims of the type of runaway housing market that has been allowed to create here, as if the market was some kind of god. The market is not a god. It's an instrument by which we work together, and hiding, this predatory behavior, hiding behind some Adam Smith thing about invisible hand. What we're seeing in the slide hand, or the under the table hand of creating inspectors getting paid off, and all kinds of swindles happening around letting housing and the whole thing be an object of the market. So this whole question of the market and the lack of political will of a mayor and an administration to say, we have a problem here, we will protect our citizenry first, and then let the investors deal with whatever they can deal with. That's a big question.
Yeah, so there's great stuff said in here. I think there's sort of two aspects of this this issue for me for homelessness. So one thing I've seen when talking to people around the city is, and this is somewhat anecdotal from my own experience, but talking to people, there's been an increasing concern over crime that's occurring and it's being attributed to folks who are homeless on the streets. I think recently we heard about these sort of 3 travelers who moved up the coast and murdered those 2 people, both in the city and in Marin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's instilled a lot of fear in people, and I think it creates a culture where everybody, since we're not inside that community, we're not inside the community that's living on the street, people sort of generalize that across the board. And when you look at that situation, you say, and I actually think the Chronicle article on this one was okay, but they talked to people on, who are living on Haight Street who'd interacted with these.
You're talking about the Kevin Fagan piece, I think, the tweakers, yeah.
And they interacted with them, and they knew, everybody there was like, oh yeah, those guys are crazy. Like I couldn't, I was scared of them. And so when we actually start talking to people who are living on the streets about that, they know those types of differentiations, and they know the types of people who are causing problems to the neighborhood and who aren't. Because frankly, everybody who's living on the street with them has the most to fear from them, more than we do. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that we need to have better dialogues across the city with everybody who's involved in the homeless population and treat them like humans so that we can better understand the distinction between those 2 pieces. And I think the other part of that to me is, in terms of homelessness, really is how do we stop homelessness from happening in the first place? And I think that's a much bigger question. But I think, Francisco's been talking about it a little bit. I think we're really at a precipice where our economy is shifting. It is completely shifting from where we have been. And I think we're seeing this as we're getting to this 1099 economy and Uber's coming in. We have this sharing model. And I think in some ways it would be very difficult for us to completely fight that model, but I think we need to understand what the role of sort of our social responsibility as a city and as a country is as this economy shifts. So we need to, as a city, start looking at fundamental models for, across-the-board health care for every citizen, for basic income. How can we get people to have money in the first place? Take housing-first policies and really think about it across the board. And so I think those are the ways that we're going to start evolving as a society that supports itself and then helps prevent people from ending up on the street.
You guys have great ideas about all these issues, but you both some of you mentioned that you were running because Amiano and Leno didn't run. So just San Francisco hasn't had a competitive mayor's race since 2003 with Gonzalez and Newsom. So I want to get your opinion about why you think no one has stepped up that can challenge Ed Lee. Why you think that he is popular in San Francisco? Do you think it's just that people aren't paying attention to local politics? I mean, he does enjoy, I guess, more than 50% popularity rating. So I was just wondering why you think that your message isn't resonating at large with the voters, and what's keeping some bigger players from jumping in to contest.
Where's the stat on 50%?
I'm just making it up.
Yeah.
If you have better numbers, by all means, I'm just throwing it out there as a... as a no?
Sounds made up because that's
Well,
not
he
what
did
I.
win. He
That's
did
not
win.
what I
He
feel when
did
I
vote.
go onto the street and campaign.
Okay.
Because everybody that I'm talking to, and I tell them that I'm running for mayor, I've talked to thousands upon thousands of people over the last 11 months, and I am distinct. Maybe in a way, because I actually entered as soon as I could. I entered into the race December 9th. So that was way before I knew if anyone else was going to enter, because I felt it critical that I come up with solutions and engage in this process. But when I do talk to people, for instance, I went onto the 5R Muni. I was too lazy to ride my bike home, so I put it up in front, and I went straight to the back. I talked to two people who had just been at the Jewish Museum for the Amy Winehouse show, and I told them what I was doing running for mayor. We had a great engaged conversation for 2 minutes, and she said, you know, Kamala Harris once shook my hand before she was anything and anybody knew her, and I have a feeling about you, and I'm excited about what you're doing. And then as I just walked back the whole bus, a lot of people had earbuds in, so I didn't connect with them. But someone said, I met you at the bike party 10 months ago or 8 months ago, and I'm voting for you. 2 people didn't know there was a mayor's race going on. Another person said, I hate Ed Lee. And that is a sentiment that I come across, and we have people who are volunteering with the Vote 123 to replace Ed Lee at different farmers markets. And when people walk by, they say, do you know that people are challenging Ed Lee? And people go, what? Really? And then they have a conversation. You get an occasional exception to that rule, but in my experience, all of the connections, except maybe 1 or 2, have been, I don't support Ed Lee.
I have to echo that same sentiment. I think one of the things that surprised me on the campaign trail, so honestly, I did not enter the race because there was no Leno, there was no race. I definitely entered it for the express purpose. I would have entered regardless of whether they were running or not. But one thing that I've been really surprised in meeting people is I've met exactly one person who said, well, Ed Lee doesn't seem that bad. Tell me why I should vote for you. Every other person says, oh, you're running against Ed Lee. Tell me more about your platform. This is really exciting. And then a number of people, as Amy was sort of evoking, was this a huge percentage of people that I've talked to did not even know that we had a mayoral race. And so from my perspective, I see this as entirely an issue of getting the message out. And I feel like it's been very difficult in the process of getting media attention pointed at this election. I think the D3 election has a ton of press, partly because it is to politicos, it is sort of this dramatic political thing that people love to pay attention to, especially on the media side, and focus on. But I think from the mayor side, we really just have had a lot of trouble getting people to start paying attention to this. And so it's really been an effort from each of us going out and trying to make that ourselves. And we don't have the, what is it, I forget, $1 million campaign that Lee has.
Yeah, 1.4.
Yeah, and so I think that's really been the big issue. And I don't feel like it's an issue of people in love with Ed Lee. It feels like it's just an issue of getting the word out.
Okay. Thoughts?
Well, we saw a lot of it at the debate the other night. Ed Lee brought in a busload of little old Chinese ladies and fellas who don't speak English. There wasn't a translator. There was one person at the front of the room who, when they all looked, and when that person clapped, they all clapped. So there's a silent, not majority, but we all have our little bubbles. And I was at Decompression yesterday campaigning. I was like fucking Paul McCartney there. It was amazing. I couldn't walk 2 feet, But if I go out to the outer sunset, I'm just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. So we have these bubbles, and it's easy to the people who I come in contact with all the time, the people you come in contact with all the time, strangers on the street, sure. But that's, our circle of influence is only so big. And I think besides Ed Lee having money, he has the political machine behind him, and Rose Pack put him there, and a lot of the people who Rose Pack, used to put him in power, see him as, he's awesome. He's he's the first Asian American mayor. That's fantastic. That's exciting. But he's benefiting from a city who won't see past him being Asian American, partially. I don't know. It's a hard machine to run up against. Yeah. I think that's part of it, and I think it's just our our sphere of influence isn't as big as we think it is, and we just don't have any money, and a lot of media is ignoring us.
Yeah, they're really kind of puts the responsibility on you guys, the Chronicle, Examiner, and the other. I mean, it was pretty clear June 9th that there was at least 6 candidates, and even there's a writing candidate, Daniel Kaplan, right? And it seems to me that really the what's the word, the onus or something like that, is it really is on the press to go beyond, does someone have enough money to run against Ed Lee? I mean, 5 of us had the courage to say, okay, well, we'll raise the $5,000 somehow or another. Here it is, we put ourselves in here and we're gonna raise, and it would make sense on a democratic process, say, okay, 5 people put their name there. And so I think that's one of the things, what we've encountered in our campaign has been a combination, very much of what used to happen in the wars where I've been. As a matter of fact, people experience a fear of reprisals. Oh, you know, I can't go there because our program will be cut, or because, or this experience of, oh, he's a great manager, not a politician, he's a great manager, and we're doing just fine. Oh, everything's just fine, and one institution actually said to us, oh yeah, those 24 families. Well, we raised so much money that one of those families was able to share with the other. I'm like, you're serious? Telling me that you've raised money for the so it's fine for them to burn out 24 families? Can you raise enough money for one family to share with the others that were burnt out and one person actually died? So there's this behavior of denial of on a happy stomach, you don't know the others. It says a saying in Spanish from my uncle. You know, it's a happy stomach doesn't recognize the empty one next to him. You know, and so it's that experience that has happened where a smaller group, or maybe a group, has benefited in some way. But in fact, we haven't found the popularity. We've been in the neighborhood, same experience that's been shared, where people run at us when they see the little sign for mayor, Francisco for mayor, and our little cards, give me that, I'm voting for you. And people are really, really, really upset at what's going on. And I don't see any big percentage in favor of having Mayor Ed Lee stay on board. In fact, there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of resentment, and there's a real pent-up rage that's happening. Our people are literally being evicted. We do not want San Francisco to be Manhattan, and they do. The investors do have a plan. Skyrisers from downtown to Ocean Beach and from downtown to Daly City, and that is the plan. Our job is to develop a plan that belongs to people, saying, how do we want San Francisco to look in the next 20, 30, 50 years?
You guys want to, you can go ahead.
Well, we should be wrapping up soon, but I did want to ask you all if you could, I mean, assuming you're not going to be in City Hall next year, you know, how are you going to carry your kind of enthusiasm and ideas and investment and kind of the city kind of forward beyond this race?
Well, part of the strategy that we developed is to create an alliance of 1, 2, 3 to replace Ed Lee, because ranked choice voting gives the electorate more power and the ability to deny an incumbent from being able to garner that 51%. So we are counting on that. But I'll on the other answer, folks.
Well, I'm in it to win it, personally, so I'll talk to you November 4th about what the future holds.
Well,
I'm doing a big thing where I'm reaching out to tech workers and trying to get people to care and be involved in the city. We have 3 seats on the board coming up next year, 3 progressive seats. We have probably more seats, but we have 3 progressives where we have Campos, Avalos, and Eric Marr. Their seats are going to be up. So part of what I'm doing is trying to get people engaged and to care, so that way, if I don't end up in room 200, I have built, you know, momentum that I can push forward towards more progressive causes, and using my website. I mean, like, for example, The Guardian, it doesn't exist in 48 Hills because their nonprofit can't do endorsements. So I'm hopefully using my voice to do endorsements for progressive campaigns, progressive candidates, and get the word out there. I mean, I've got 150,000 unique visitors a month on my website. So if I can get, you know, those people to vote and care, it's huge, and that can really push progressive politics in the city far, hopefully.
And let me just add that I've created policy ideas like some of my colleagues here have, and I hope that whoever becomes mayor actually uses them, including Ed Lee. If he becomes mayor again, I want him to use them. And if the four of us, if any of us become mayor, I mean, I can say for myself, we're a great team. And everybody who's at this table, I want to be part of the future of San Francisco.
For me, I'm also in it to win it, and what we decided to design is we went around and talked with over 200 people from different communities, organizations, and what we see that is a need above and beyond electoral politics is really a people's campaign, very much what Stuart just mentioned, very much building on popular participation across party, city, across party line, across ethnic lines, religious lines, social group lines, where we have a plan and a vision for San Francisco. So we've defined 4 victories for November 3rd, moving beyond win or lose paradigm, because I think that's a very debilitating paradigm, the win or lose thing. And so we have identified 4 wins. One is the mayor's. Second is establishing a sense of a citywide alliance. Third is pushing the progressive propositions, and fourth is very much what Stuart mentioned, is helping garner support for progressives to take over a majority in the 2016 race. Those are four, and so for us, November 3rd is about measuring how far we can get there and continue November 4th, November 6th, 10th, December, January, building up a people's alliance.
Yeah, I think November 3rd is the goal right now, and kind of post that, depending on how things shake out, I've been building a sort of, actually just recently filed for nonprofit status, an organization called the Grand City Movement, and it's about taking pride and helping build this vision for what a world-class city is. It is a more equitable model, it's a more inclusive model, but that also has a celebration of what it is to be, in this case, San Francisco.
Are you all supporting the mission moratorium ballot measure? Is that something?
I am.
The affordable housing bond?
Yes.
You all supporting that?
What about Prop F?
Yes. Prop F plus Airbnb equals fair B&B.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, the moratorium one was a difficult one for me, I would say.
So you're supporting that?
I am officially supporting that one.
Are you all renters?
Renters. I think that we decided not to call the Prop I a moratorium because it's not a moratorium as much as it is, there's a housing crisis. The last thing we need right now is more luxury apartments, and it's really looking at affordability as the main piece. Prop A, I would not trust it in the world under the leadership of Ed Lee, because there's no language that said he has to use it for that. And neither is the Prop D. There's a gentleman's handshake. It's really about cutting off height limits. And so those things, unless one of us is in, I know if I'm in as mayor, I love Prop A because that's what we're going to apply it to.
Right.
But there's nothing holding the mayor except popular demand to really use that money in that way. And Prop F is another one that was forced upon the populace to come up with, because people have gone time and again to deaf ears in City Hall, and no protection for the people of San Francisco.
And Prop F actually will cut down on this idea of spying. We've all seen the binocular ads, which is just absurd. It would actually cut down on it because we would know that Airbnb was not able to host a unit unless it had been registered with the city, and we would have the data to back it up. Now I'm seeing people with suitcases. I live on Fulton across from USF. They're bringing their suitcases up. I've seen this now a bunch of times, and I went up to them yesterday and I said, do you know if the person actually lives here who is renting out? Oh, she lives in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
But that's not enforceable right now. It is designed for complaints. It's a complaint-driven process. So Airbnb is being completely insincere with saying that it will shut down, neighbors spying on neighbors, because that's the only way right now that we can enforce. And they've taken thousands of units off the market illegally.
It's funny too, because like, oh, it means your neighbors can see you. They can see you anyways. This is America. You can sue somebody for anything.
And this is the most common thing that happens from the smallest town in California to the largest. A neighbor sees a neighbor building a staircase, they're immediately on the county, hey, my neighbor's building a staircase. So it's to create this little bogeyman thing.
Boogeyman.
In general, on the three propositions, I'm supporting Prop F, but I don't think it was, in many situations with propositions that I strongly disagree with, I generally don't like the proposition system. Proposition F, I feel like, would be solved with a vacancy tax much more effectively than the regulation of Airbnb. So I don't love how Prop F is worded. Similarly with Prop A, I don't think the moratorium is a good housing policy model, but I strongly agree with what it does to push the city.
Well, A is the affordable. A is the affordable.
A or I?
What did I say? Yeah, I meant I.
Okay.
Sorry. I is I like what it does to push the city and force them to make a plan.
Yeah.
I don't think it's good housing policy in general, and I don't agree with A. I think somewhat similarly, perhaps if I was in office, I would agree with A, but I just generally I'm voting no on A in the sense that I don't. It's a lot of money. It's taken out as a bond. We should be doing this as actual funding policies, and it doesn't have enough restriction of what it's going to do. And even some of the things, I think the Green Party actually was coming up with a number of units, and it's less than 1,000 units that it's going to create. It's not going to make a dent in affordability in San Francisco.
We could go on and on, I think.
I got one question for all of you, and it's kind of multi-part. Have you held elective office before? Do you think that kind of experience is necessary in this capacity? And then in the same vein, I hear a lot of overlap and agreement between all of you. Would you consider any kind of united front, or joining together if the common goal is to unseat Ed Lee?
Well, we have done that. I mean, vote 1, 2, 3 to replace Ed Lee is an alliance, and over the last week and a half.
What is the alliance? I don't think we're all familiar with the alliance.
So it's the three candidates here, myself, Stuart, and Francisco, that have connected on that front. Reed has actually come in a little bit late in the game. We were doing a lot of work in the community and didn't, quite frankly, see Reed around, but I love a lot of Reed's ideas. They're very much in alignment. And so, the way it is that we have 3 votes, first, second, and third choice with ranked choice. And so we're asking our supporters to vote 1, 2, and 3, and then whoever gets into office, and I am now extending this to Reed, I want him to be part of our collaborative team no matter what happens, but someone will be elected out of this 4, and I see that happening. I don't personally have elected experience as a politician, but I started a nonprofit 4 years ago called Neighbors Developing Divisadero. I've developed many programs, done sustainability strategy at high level, worked with executives at Walmart. So I have the utmost confidence in my ability to actually do this work. I actually used to go to school in these offices because it was SF State, and it was a master's in organizational development that I designed. I created a new project that has been offered 3 different times. So I do have the leadership ability. And, one of the things that I've been thinking of is having Ed Lee as mayor, and he's a lawyer. We hear him say in the past that he used to take initiative because he was a lawyer to protect tenants. But I talked to him a couple months ago, and I asked him if he had supported the Eviction Protection Act yet, and he said he was waiting to hear from his lawyers whether or not we as the city could get sued. He's not leading the way, he's not really paying attention, and now he got trained to be a lawyer to represent both sides, even if he knew one of them was guilty. And I feel that's what he's doing for big corporations right now.
In terms of serving in office, I've not served in office. I've served as elected member of the executive board of the San Francisco Transit Riders for the last 3 years. I don't think it's essential. I don't think serving elected office is essential to the role. In fact, Ed Lee was appointed to the role in the first place, right?
Yeah, he was never elected.
He was never elected either.
He didn't serve an elected post before.
Correct. He was appointed by Newsom and then took that over and then ran for election the first time, which was not supposed to happen. So I don't think that's relevant to the position. I think that we can see a lot of, we can see the sorts of problems that we have, and we know how to make them. We know how to solve those problems without having had the context of that, and I think actually it offers an opportunity for us to be able to look outside of the political machine. I think from our perspective, I'm unaffiliated with Democrats. I'm not a registered Democrat. I look at the democratic machine and I see a lot of systemic old world political problems, and I don't want anything to do with those pieces. And my background is in tech. I've worked with the tech world for a long time. Tech is always at its best when it's sort of subservient to humanity, and we're creating real solutions to create better futures. And so I think we can take those same models, which is stuff I've been working on for the last decade, and apply them into the city. And I had the opportunity to work for a brief while with the city of Paris and the mayor over there, and I've been sort of inspired and seen leadership and what it takes to lead a world city, and I've really been very impressed by the work that they're able to do when they have actual leadership, and I think that we can do the same thing without having to have any background or context in this world. Yeah.
I think that having been elected office should preclude you from being mayor of San Francisco, in this town. I was vice president of my high school. That's the only thing I've had otherwise. So not really, but I don't think it matters. I mean, look at Willie Brown, Gavin Newsom, Ed Lee. They've all been elected, and look where our city's at right now. So, and yes, I'd love to work with these people some more.
Same. I have the experience of working for budgetary and policy changes from the community level, and the experience has been to work with supervisors, with mayors, and with other folks. And I think it's key to be able to bring people together. And what hasn't been going on that I think I have ability to do is to bring that wisdom and that knowledge from the different neighborhoods, projects that have been tried and true, the 1400 block of Haight and Ashbury, projects that they labor for the Colectiva de Mujeres that has been pushing to the domestic workers Bill of Rights. Those kind of projects already exist. The People's Budget 15 years ago, the City Master Plan, so much stuff that's already in place, and that really needs to be paid attention to and has been shelved because the priority has been given to investment firms.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate your time, appreciate your thoughts. Thank you for coming in.
We appreciate that you that you wanted to see us before you that Lee endorsement like the Chronicle did.
Right. And hopefully you're actually inspired about what we're doing, because it's new. It's new for San Francisco. And so much is on the line right now.
Absolutely.
It's nice, just when I thought everyone with talent got displaced. Wow.
Dude, I want to make a skit of the mariachi problem.